You are listening to the Sound in Faith podcast, coming to you from Faith Baptist Fellowship in beautiful Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
And it is beautiful today, isn't it?
It is. It's a lovely day. It's very nice. I'm Pastor Thomas Lawson.
And I'm Pastor Mike Johnson.
And Pastor Mike, we got to get a bigger table or something. When we have guests on, this is kind of tight.
Yeah, and that's a great segue to the guest that we have on today.
Yes. Hey, can I just say something?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah, the person that we have on as our guest today, I like a lot better than you.
Oh,
I like you. You're my friend, Pastor Mike.
I'm not hurt by that.
But I like this person a lot better.
Joining
I
us
appreciate that.
in the studio today is Christy Slauson. Christy
Yes.
Slauson is Thomas's wife. That's why he likes her better than he likes me. which-
As it should be.
As it should be.
As it should be.
And she's on the program today to talk about raising their son who has special needs and what the Bible has to say about disability. And I think this is going to be a good podcast. It's going to be very helpful for us as we think through these things. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
And yeah, I'm pretty biased. I love our guest today. You're the first lady on the program.
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
Wow.
So
Groundbreaking.
congratulations.
I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah. We're glad to have you with us today. So
Yes.
Pastor Mike, I think you're going to lead off on some of this with these questions, but let me just say, let me kind of frame this. Up here in South Dakota, we have this Amendment G that is on the ballots.
Yes.
That will basically codify within the state constitution, if it's passed, the right to an abortion. And it's
Yes.
very radical.
But it's not just radical; it's big time immoral, and all the language is slippery. There's, they talk about a trimester framework for regulation, but even that's very, very slippery with some of the language. But at the end of the day, I see signs that say it's too radical everywhere, and it is very radical. But the thing that bothers me most is that every single human being, including the preborn, is made in the image of God.
Yes. Yeah.
And this Amendment G, if it passes, will codify abortion rights in our Constitution and preclude any meaningful regulation against abortion. So I hope that our listeners will vote no on Amendment G.
Yeah. And yes, that's our hope. We hope our South Dakota listeners will vote no on Amendment G. We hope that if you're in another state and there's a similar type of measure on your ballots, that you will also seek to strike those down.
Yeah, and there's like a dozen almost.
Yeah.
So I know Nebraska has one, and several other states do too.
And so with this, we're talking today about God's goodness, grace, and glory in disability.
Yes.
Because those who are born with disabilities or those who experience disabilities are valuable in the eyes of the Lord. He's loved by them.
Amen.
And all of life is precious. And so these two themes really tie in together,
Yeah.
and that's why we're talking about it today.
Right. So I'd love to hear, I know our listeners would, from both of you, since this is your journey together, Christy and Thomas. Tell us about your journey. Tell us about how things are going now and all of that with having a child with special needs.
All right. Well, our son's name is Isaiah, and he is 18, and we found out that he would be born with disability when I was about 16 weeks along in the pregnancy. We went in for the really fun ultrasound of finding out the gender, and we were all excited, and the ultrasound tech was doing her work, and all of a sudden she just got really quiet. And it's our first child, so all of our expectations are probably pretty high about what this is going to be like. And within a few hours, we found out that Isaiah was going to be born with spina bifida, and he has hydrocephalus. And I had heard those words before, but I didn't know what they meant. And so it started us on a long journey of figuring that out. And it's turned out that those are not the only disabilities that he has. He has some additional ones, some seen, some unseen, which is a whole other aspect of working with disability. But I would say right now, he's actually doing really well.
Yeah.
He's thriving. He's happy. He
I
looks
love his
forward to
smile.
things.
He is
Yeah.
always smiling. When I see him, he's smiling.
He loves church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Loves church.
Does he ever love church?
Yeah.
Yeah, similar story here, of course. I remember sitting in the waiting room before we went back to get the ultrasound, and the television in the waiting room was like playing some kind of medical channel. I don't know where they, it's stories and things like that. And it was about a woman who had become a doctor because her brother was born with Down syndrome. And just that led to her having a heart for compassion, a heart of compassion for people who were needy. And I just remember sitting there thinking, and this is before we went for the ultrasound, Lord, I just don't think I could do that. I don't think I could ever handle, doing that. That's wonderful that she did that. And not a few minutes later, we were finding out some really life-changing news that was not anything that we expected. We didn't expect that. So it was very much a shock to us at that time. Over the years, there have been lots of things that have happened, but we're really, excited about where he is right now and how he's doing. God has been very gracious.
Could you share with us some of the biggest challenges you have faced on this journey?
Exhaustion would be one for sure. Just you're kind of always on alert for, wait, is this something that we need? Because one of his conditions is hydrocephalus, and he has what's called a distal proximal shunt.
Maybe me explain hydrocephalus.
Yeah, so hydrocephalus is extra fluid on the brain. So all of us have cerebrospinal fluid. Most of us, it drains down into the spinal area. Because of Isaiah's condition, his doesn't drain. So it just builds and builds and builds. So like when he was born, his forehead kind of curved forward, and he had a lot of fluid. So they put in a shunt. If that shunt should malfunction, he could die within 24 to 36 hours. So especially early on, the symptoms of a shunt malfunction overlap with like many common childhood illnesses. So
lack of sleep.
Yeah.
There's so many different things.
So many things. And so there's that. And then when he was about a year old, we discovered he had epilepsy as well. So seizures could be a sign of a shunt malfunction, and seizures themselves can be life-threatening. Does
he still suffer seizures?
Yes, he does. Pretty much every day he'll have at least one or two small seizures.
They're better now.
They're way better now.
He's gone through periods where they've been very strong, very prolonged.
And they would send us to the hospital.
But he's getting good treatment now that are keeping them very minimal.
It's very manageable.
By comparison.
But I mean, so you're just, that constant hypervigilance is exhausting. I would say was one thing. And then also, like relationally, it puts a strain on your marriage, because sometimes he would want, he's an extrovert, I'm an introvert. So he would want to be like, let's tell all these people and let's ask for prayer. And I'd be like, no, it's not that I didn't want people to pray, but I was just like, no, I can't talk about this right now with a bunch of people. And so just working through things like that, things you wouldn't think of as a challenge with our surrounding disability.
Yeah. The medical challenges, I mean, he's very medically involved.
Yeah.
So there's always a lot going on there. And some things are very clear. It's like, hey, this is going on, we need to do this. Other things are not clear. And you're trying to decide, do we need to go to the ER, or do we need to, do we need to call an ambulance? Long-term treatments, things like that. So that, that can lead to a lot of stress and a lot of temptation to worry. And I think connected with that, there's things going on here. You kind of go into task mode, and we've got to figure out what's going on here and how to best handle it, and seek the wisdom of the Lord in what's the right direction to take. But it's very sanctifying spiritually, because by nature I'm a warrior, and I overthink things.
As in WORRI.
Warrior, not a
yeah.
warrior.
Clarifying.
I'm not a warrior by nature. I'm a worrier by nature.
Waiting for you to paint half your face blue.
So, I've gone to Matthew 6 many times about don't be anxious, because you can begin to think, I can begin to think the worst.
Yeah.
I can begin to kind of twirl the spear and think, this could lead to this, and then what's going to happen? And so over his 18 years of life, the Lord has done some surgery on different parts of my mind and heart to kind of weed some of those things out, and continues to do that.
Yeah.
And that's been, it's good that he's doing that, but it's painful at times.
I want to hear in a moment about the blessings that this has been for you. But in the kind providence of God, this has shaped your ministry in some ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's shaped the course of it. It's shaped where you're at right now. And you're both Christians. You've been Christians a long time.
Yeah.
So tell me, and you both love the Bible. So tell me about how the Bible has, the scriptures have shaped your understanding of disabilities and God's providence in that and those kind of things.
Well, I'll kind of start, and Cristy, if you want to pick up, let me begin by saying disability is not God's intention at creation in the sense that it's not good in and of itself. It's not good that people experience pain, suffering, disability, all of those things. Now, we're going to get to how he uses that for good. And so the reality is, after the fall, we live in a broken world. And because we live in a broken world, because of the effects of the fall upon us, people experience sickness, disease, congenital birth defects, all of those things like that. But what's so beautiful is that even in the midst of the fallen world where those things happen, we see God's hand at work in and through the sufferings of people, in and through things like disability, to bring about profound blessings and profound good in the lives of his people and in the ministry of his church and throughout the world.
Well, I would say specific passages when Isaiah, before he was even born, a lady from the church that we were in at the time in Yazoo City, Mississippi, they gave us all kinds of showers and so many gifts. But one of the things that I still have is a little onesie that says, "I am fearfully and wonderfully made."
Oh.
So Psalm 139, those verses 14 through 16, where it talks about God has formed someone in the womb, the psalmist in the womb. He saw my inward parts. Like, this wasn't a mistake.
Right.
I mean, yes, it's a result of a fallen world, but Isaiah's condition is not a mistake.
Yeah.
And so that was very grounding. I clung to that passage in the early years and still. And then, honestly, I think seeing how Jesus interacted with people in the Gospels, not just people with disabilities, but there were people with disabilities. Like with John 9, I remember one of the first words that the obstetrician came in and told me when we found out. She grabbed my hand and she was like, "This is not your fault. You did not do anything wrong." And that was very comforting to me. I mean, I tend to take on things that I shouldn't in general.
John 9 is the passage about
with the man who was born blind.
And
so
they're wondering who's sin.
right.
Yeah.
The disciples literally ask, "Well, whose fault is this?"
Right.
His parent did this
his
man sin
parents?
or his parents?
Yeah. And Jesus was like, "No, this man was born blind to reveal the glory of God."
Right.
Can I read it? Can I read the passage? I mean,
yeah.
it's just, he says it so wonderfully. It's not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him.
Wow.
Yeah.
And in the context of John's gospel, it was written so that we might believe. That man was born blind in the providence of God so that Jesus would come along at that time, heal him, so that people would believe and have everlasting life.
Can I press in a little bit on that?
Yeah.
So if disability displays the goodness of God, which I agree it does, how has Isaiah's disability displayed the glory of God, the goodness of God, the kindness of God?
Well, I think one way, honestly, is in how Isaiah displays the fruit of the Spirit. Nobody loves like Isaiah loves. Nobody shows joy like Isaiah shows joy. And Isaiah is a faithful friend. And so I think he uniquely displays the fruit of the Spirit in a way that we, in our busyness, in our seemingly complicated lives, just can't. And I think that kind of goes with a question you had later on, but
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that's a unique way that Isaiah displays the goodness of God.
There's too many to count. I agree with that. And just the doors that have been opened over the years for our family, I think it's allowed us to go into places that otherwise we would have not been able to go. I mean, one of the cool things that we saw early on was in 2009, I had an iPad. I was one of the first iPads that ever came out, and I had that iPad. We were living in Russia still at the time, and I would load sermons on there. I loaded John Piper sermons on there, and would listen to some of those, watch some of those, and so we started letting Isaiah. He was still very young at the time, but we started letting him play with the iPad because we thought maybe it would be good for him, and it was. There was a lot of good things that came out of that. But we would find that every time we gave him the iPad, he would open up John Piper sermons and just watch John Piper sermons. Cool. And so, that went on for a long time. But when we ended up moving back to the States, we would, he had to have a lot of surgeries. He's had over 50 surgeries. That's one thing. He's had over 50 surgeries in his life. I kind of stopped
counting after 35. It's just a bunch.
Wow. So in his life, he's had over 50 surgeries. But he would go in the hospital.
I mean, just doing the math, he's 18. Mm-hmm. That's many a year.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Some years.
He's had multiples some years, yeah.
We'd be in the hospital. He'd be in the bed recovering afterwards. And
this is before Bluetooth headphones.
This is before Bluetooth headphones. So he would have his iPad out. We ended up getting him his own iPad at some point. And he'd be sitting there in the hospital bed watching John Piper sermons. And, there's nurses and doctors and assistants and helpers and all of that coming in. And of course, Isaiah can't sit there and say, verbally articulate because of his cognitive limitations. He can't say, hey, let me tell you about the gospel of Jesus Christ. Let me explain this to you. But he's sitting there holding this. We saw it many times, like someone would walk in and there's John Piper preaching and the doctor's there checking on Isaiah or the nurse is adjusting an IV or something. And the sermon is going, hey, God wants you to know you don't have to die in your sin. There is hope. There's everlasting life. There's everlasting. It's like,
This happened more than once.
That they would walk in at like the most poignant moment in the sermon where the gospel was being so clearly articulated. And there's this iPad there just proclaiming the good news as my son holds it. And that opened up opportunities with so many people. We're in, very secular Portland at the time, getting him treated. But even the effect on our children and our family and how we've seen it develop in them. God has used that to produce compassion and empathy for their brother and caring and in many cases selflessness and a gentleness that I think has been grown in them because they have this brother that they know we have to care for, and he has these needs, these special needs, but through that it's a ministry to them. He ministers to them in that way.
So is it fair to say that you both as a couple know the Lord better because of Isaiah?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
And that his siblings are going to know the Lord better.
I think so.
And his kindness.
Yeah.
And in that way, he displays the glory of God in a rich way.
Yeah.
That's really wonderful.
There's been days of intense joy and there's been days of intense sorrow. But, God's word is filled with that. I mean, there have been the Psalm 103 days, bless the Lord, O my soul. There's been the Psalm, Psalm 42, why are you cast down, O my soul? There's been all of those days. Another thing I just got to say, tell him about the singing thing. And, when he watches now our services on.
So this is whether sometimes we have to stay home for, we have 4 children, so we have a little petri dish going on. But whether it's he's watching it on his iPad or we watch it live, the live stream, he will. So Isaiah sings. If you sit near,
in his way.
In his way. If you sit near us in church, you'll hear him. Yeah. Like the last line of the last word in a line of a song, he'll just shout it out.
It's lovely.
Yeah, it's great. Anyway, but he will like raise his hands and he's so excited. And he wants to play his guitar when we're at home. We got him a guitar one year for Christmas, and he leads us in worship at home. So he'll sit there and he'll have his guitar and he's like, I help Dad. You know,
Yeah.
it's great.
He doesn't, he's not playing formed chords on there. He
he'll
just holds
kinda
it and
pluck
just
at
strums it.
Yeah.
You've had him on the you've had him on the work like
Yeah, before it was up on stage.
Yeah. But he'll, sometimes we'll see on his baby monitor in his room, he'll be watching our service.
Yeah, and he'll just have a hand
You'll
up
see
in
it.
the
You'll see his
air.
hand up as he's watching the service.
And sometimes he's like, I'm like Pastor Mike.
Oh,
He'll say, yeah.
he's pretty awesome.
And one more thing about the kids too, because as we've have our family worship times, devotional times, the theme of heaven and the new heavens and the new earth comes up a lot. And I remember one time, I think it was Lily or Nadia drew a picture of our family, and Isaiah. This is gonna make you cry, isn't it?
Probably. Doesn't take much.
But Isaiah wasn't in a wheelchair, and we
Yeah.
said, "Oh, he's not in his wheelchair," and he's like, "Well, this is the new heavens and the new earth."
Oh,
And,
that's awesome.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
will say having a child with disability has made me long for heaven
Yeah.
in a way like nothing else could. Just long for that sinless perfection.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I think he'll still have some of his quirks and silliness and everything, but yeah, it's just,
Yeah.
it's cool.
So tell me about more of the blessings, like the blessings of having Isaiah at home and the blessings he is to the family. And
Do you have any? Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say my own spiritual growth. I mean, we've kind of talked on that. It's definitely stretched me to. I struggle with wanting to rest in my own strength, and so here I see my child at various stages where he is completely dependent, and that's not a bad thing. And so, just a picture of that for me spiritually, of how like it is a beautiful thing for me to be completely dependent on God and not doing things in my own strength. So
It's a
there's that
reminder
one.
to us, his dependence upon us. Okay, he's or others that help care for him. He has some nurses that come and help, but that utter dependence is a reminder of our utter dependence.
Yeah.
We see with him, humanly speaking, visible weakness. He has these limitations that. Physical limitations, cognitive limitations, things that he can't do, and we provide for him. But in the same way, before God, we are utterly dependent upon him. We are weak. Paul talks about that. It's so that the glory might rest in God, that all glory might go to him, that we are weak. I'm sorry, I'm not getting the verse quoted exactly right now, but Paul talks about that, how we are weak before him, that his strength might be magnified. And that's how we see that. It's a visible reminder of that all the time, that we are utterly dependent upon the Lord to care for us and provide for us for all of our needs. Yeah.
that's so good. That's really good. You're Pastor Thomas, so you're pastor of a local church, this local church. And I want to ask a question about Isaiah and the church. But before I do, I'll just say, I remember candidating here back in May of last year, and I noticed that there were several children with disabilities in our congregation.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking and talking about it with Maya later, how that looks like this is a church that cares for people with disabilities and welcomes people, and I loved seeing that. It was a very attractive thing to me because it's God's grace. But I want to ask the other angle of that. Like, what part do children with disabilities play in the church? Like the other side of that. Like the church plays a significant part.
Yeah.
And I think we know, we could talk about that. Maybe we should. But kids with disabilities play a part too. And what part is that?
Well, I think some of the things that we've already touched on, they exhibit the fruits of the Spirit. I think they can show us in ways that we might not readily think to see in our own lives, that what really matters. What really matters is a love for God and a love for people, and obeying the two greatest commandments. And so they are if God has done a work in their hearts, they are brothers and sisters in Christ.
Yes.
And so they serve a vital role in displaying the love of Christ to us. And I think, and not that they are without their bad days,
Sure.
for sure. But I think that there is an aspect often of that childlike faith that comes out sometimes. And for depending on what the disability might be, but also just that they have value in the church. It might not be what we first think of. Like, they might not be able to set up the stage, or they might not be able to preach, or they might not be able to join the choir, or they might not be able to do X, Y, Z, whatever it is. But they grow in Christ just like we do. They grow in the fruit of the Spirit, and they display it. And that is such a huge part of our community,
Yes.
is to show each other the fruit of the Spirit.
I'm thinking of there are two little girls in our church who have cerebral palsy, and then there's Isaiah, and all three of them every Sunday I see their smile,
Yeah.
and it's a blessing to me. Like every Sunday that they're there, I feel blessed because I see their smile, and one of them comes up and grabs onto my leg, and not Isaiah, and
He
it's
would
just-
have before.
yeah. But
when
it's
he was
beautiful. It's beautiful, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. There's so many things. We have different members of the body, and we all work together. Different parts of the body. Some parts of the body are more prominent in how they serve others, but we're all indispensable. And I think that's one thing to remember. And this kind of ties into one of the next questions. We talk about serving people with disabilities. I think we should. I think we should care for members of the body that have needs. But we forget that they are also a ministry to us. They are serving also as part of the body, even if it's just merely by their presence. They're a testament. Because people with disabilities can function at different levels. You have some people that might be wheelchair bound, but can still be very active in a number of things, and they do things. But what if you have a member of the body that literally can't do anything other than just be there? They are still part of the body, and their presence in the body still serves us. And we've talked about, I think, some of the ways that we mentioned how it's been a blessing to our family personally also are part of how they bless the body. It's a reminder of God's care for us, that we are dependent upon Him. It's a reminder that all people are created in the image and likeness of God, and that life is precious. It's a reminder that through people with disabilities, the works of God are displayed, and we see His hand. And it teaches us selflessness. It teaches us humility. It crushes pride. It teaches us patience. We haven't personally experienced this, but I have heard firsthand stories from people who have, where they've gone to visit churches and they've got a child with autism or a child with special needs that makes noises or, does things like that. And someone has come up to them and said, hey, maybe come in this other room over here so that they're not a disturbance to anyone else. Well, there's times when we might have to put up with yelps in the service or screams or things like that, and see that not as an inconvenience, but a reminder that we are the people of God all here together as one body and serving together, and showing that patience and love with other members of the body that might be needy in many ways. That's a ministry to us. Yeah. That ministers to our spirits.
I think it gives us an opportunity to live out Philippians 2.
Yeah.
Where Paul instructs us to think of other people as more significant than yourself. And I think that's a great
That's really good.
So I would say, remember, people with special needs, disabilities, we don't merely serve them in the body. They serve us.
Right.
They are serving us also.
That's a good
and
word.
That's critical to remember.
But on the other side, because I think it's helpful to talk about that too, how should the church serve families with children with disabilities? And also, how should the church serve people with disabilities, outside of their family unit?
I would say one way, and I brought some visual aids.
Oh, nice. Which you have to check out our YouTube to be able to see them.
You'll
But
have
you
to
can
see
read
this
the
on
titles.
YouTube.
Yeah.
Yes. So I would say one thing you can do if you have children or young people in your life, because all of us are kind of afraid of something that's different than us, right? And so children with disabilities are different than children who don't have any noticeable disabilities. So there are some excellent books out there that you can read with your kids. This one I'm not as familiar with because I just got it, but it's called God Made Me Unique, Helping Children See Value in Every Person, if you can see that. And it is put together by Johnny and Friends. So Johnny Erickson Tata, who has a huge ministry to people with disabilities. And then this one is written by Randy Alcorn. It's called Wait Until Then. This was the very first book I ever read about disability. And it still makes me ugly cry when I get to the end. It's a beautiful story. Yeah. So the boy actually has spina bifida. So that was kind of personal. And then he has a really special relationship with his grandpa, which Isaiah has a really special relationship with his grandpa. Oh. And then at the end, I won't give it away, but it makes you point to heaven. So
precious.
It's beautiful. Good. And then this one's probably my favorite though. It's called Like Me. It's by Laura Whiffler. And it basically walks through a day of the older brother describing what it's like to have a younger brother with a disability. Mm-hmm. My kids love this book. Yeah. They read it. Steven, our youngest, he's 6. He's just learning to read. So he reads it to himself. And he's like, oh, these pictures are so good. But he can remember it. I've read it to him enough times. So I would say that is one thing you can do that's pretty simple. And then another thing you can do is just treat people with disabilities the way you want to be treated.
That's a good word.
Don't be afraid.
Yeah. And it could be very awkward. I know sometimes Isaiah is very chatty. This is just our experience, and everyone's experience will be different, of course. But sometimes Isaiah is extremely chatty and wants to talk. And then sometimes people will come up to him and talk to him, and he just kind of sits there. Yeah. But he knows when people address him, he does talk about it. Like, it could be hours later and he'll tell me he talked to so-and-so and he didn't say a word in the conversation, but he remembers. And so part of acknowledging this is a person made in God's image. I'm going to talk to you with respect. I'm not going to baby talk to you. Yeah. I'm not going to talk down to you. I'm just going to talk to you. And that's been a great experience here. So anything, I want to clarify, like anything
Faith
that we
is
say,
really good at that.
Yes.
Faith is really good.
The things that we might suggest here, it's not because there's an absence of it here at Faith, just to be clear on that. But that would be huge. Just treat them as your brother or sister in Christ and how you want to be treated.
And just kind of, as you're going along, because everyone with special needs is at a different place. So some people, if you walk up to Isaiah, you don't feel the need to strike up a conversation about existential nihilism or something like that. Just, how's school? How you been doing, bud? That kind of thing like that. There might be there's people out there in wheelchairs that can talk about existential nihilism. So don't get me wrong. But, just kind of judge it as you go along and say, just short, friendly conversations, things like that. Treat them how you want to be treated. Treat them like brothers and sisters.
That's a good word.
See them as part of the body. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I would say too, also be aware of like the families sometimes that care for children or adults with special needs, that you might ask them to do something that like go hang out on a certain night or get together for that, and they just might not be able to do it. So don't be afraid to ask, but also don't be offended if they say no. That's another one that I think is a good little practical bit of advice.
Yeah.
Okay, so next question. I'm curious, how important is it to have a biblical understanding of the sanctity of human life? I want to load this question a little bit. We're in an era when we have a lot of prenatal diagnoses. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And a lot of actions are sadly taken because of prenatal diagnoses. What role should a biblical understanding of the sanctity of human life play as we think about disabilities with children?
I think it's foundational. I think, so my main doctor, when I was pregnant with Isaiah, she apologized because she had to legally give us the option of an abortion. She was like, I'm so sorry I have to say this, but legally I'm required to let you know. Then we went to a maternal fetal specialist, and I'm not a violent person, but I was not happy with him because he multiple times.
She was not happy.
I was not happy with him.
I wasn't either.
Multiple times he was giving us an out. And I was like, this is our son, and his name is Isaiah. And I'll be honest, I wanted to slap him because I was so angry that he wouldn't listen and acknowledge that this child is important to us. And he's a maternal fetal specialist. Like, it just made no sense to me. So I would say having that foundational belief that every single person is created in the image of God, it just takes away the question then of aborting that child, of killing that child. It does away with it.
And I think too, for a Christian, and this is something that I think is important for ministries out there that are trying to help women with unexpected, unwanted pregnancies and show them the value of life, that even if you find out in the womb that there is some kind of condition, syndrome, whatever the case may be, to remember the value of life that created in the image and likeness of God from conception until death. But there are untold blessings. There will be challenges. There are going to be challenges. It will be hard, but there are blessings that you are going to miss out on that are so precious that cannot be known, I think, in any other circumstances than caring for a child with special needs. God is, I can't even begin to articulate how profoundly different I think my life is today than if Isaiah had not been born into our family.
That's a good word from both of you. Thank you. Any advice for a family just learning maybe that there's, a lot of the diagnosis comes in the first year of the child's life, sometimes prenatally. What advice for somebody who's just learned that they're going to have a different path?
Be in God's word and lean into your church community. Find a church community, if you don't have one, that will love you and support you, walk alongside you during this time. But go to the Lord in His word and in prayer. His grace is sufficient, and He will meet you in your need and provide for your need according to His strength, not your own. It is more than your strength can take. God will give you more than you are able to handle, but He will provide the strength in and of Himself to guide you through that.
Very good.
I had be in the word.
Yeah.
Grow in your knowledge of and love for God. You think we know each other?
Yeah. We didn't prepare ahead of time.
We did not. We didn't discuss this ahead of time. And community is a big one. And I would say just be prepared to be super flexible. Plans are great. I'm a planner. I love making plans, but you have to hold them loosely. And then I would also have a word to people who know a family that is affected by disability or will be or is preparing to be. So like extended family, close friends. There's a lot of grief that happens at different stages along the way. And I would say just listening and knowing that, reminding the person of truth lovingly, gently, knowing that they might be in a really hard spot right in this moment. Let them get that out and talk about it and be their tether to the truth at times when it's hard. And I think that holds with any suffering, but there's that. And then and praying with them, sending them text messages. Disability can be very isolating. And for lots of different reasons. And so there are a lot of times, again, kind of going back to that exhaustion, like I just forget to text people when I need help. And so checking in on them, even if they haven't reached out, would be really a good idea.
This has been an awesome conversation. I'm so thankful, and it blessed my heart just hearing your story and how God's worked through your lives and through Isaiah's life. And So thank you for
Well,
for sharing.
thanks for letting us have the opportunity to share it, Pastor Mike. And as you can see now, why something like Amendment G is so, so important to us. And seeing that not pass, we believe in the preciousness of life, and we believe that God has created and formed in the womb every child, whether that child will grow up neurotypical or physically typical or with special needs. And all of life is precious, and we want to do whatever we can to protect it.
Wonderful.
We do have one question today.
Yeah,
Pastor
listener
Mike,
question.
and get our nice little elevator music going here.
Yeah. We're going to let Cristy answer it.
So I'll read this for us. I'm going to let, can you explain, this is from Anonymous. It says, can you explain how we are saved by faith alone in light of what James 2:24 says when it says, you see that a person is justified by works and not by faith alone?
Yeah, so I love the question. I love the question because, we want to be Bible people who are thoroughly steeped in the Bible. And this is a passage that a lot of people who deny sola fide or faith alone will drop. And they'll drop it kind of cheeky, the Bible says something about faith alone. Look at James 2:24. But let's think about context and what James is addressing. Right in that passage, he says, you'll show me your faith this way. I'll show you my faith by my works.
Yes.
And he's demonstrating that, the old saying that you can attribute to Calvin and Spurgeon and many others through the years, the faith that saves, we are saved by faith alone, but the faith that saves is never alone. And the point that James is bringing out is that the faith that saves is never alone. Like, if your faith doesn't do anything in your life, there's something inherently wrong with your faith. It's not genuine. The faith that saves, you don't trust Christ if you're not following him. And that's not trust. Trust is faith. True faith follows Jesus, and life is transformed and changed, and good works are present. So the demonstration of faith, and what James is really concerned with, he's not contradicting Paul at all in Romans when he says we are justified by faith apart from works. There's no contradiction here. He's complementing it by saying, yes, we are saved by faith apart from works, but faith is always accompanied by works.
And in saying that we are in Christ, or that we have faith, by demonstrating that faith, it justifies that what we have said is correct. We're not being justified or declared righteous before God because of our works. We are showing them our faith to be true by doing the works that accompany faith. Would you say that's correct?
Well, I've heard that. I'm not sure that he's talking about a different justification there. I think it's even if he's just talking about the classic legal justification, it still works. He's saying, it's still.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay.
It's still.
That's a good point of clarification.
True, genuine faith that saves.
Yeah.
Is always accompanied by works.
Gotcha.
But it's not the works. It's not merit. You don't merit anything before God. Even those works, as Paul, if we dig into it, Paul who says it's God who works in you both to will and to do of His good pleasure.
Yeah.
Even the works are from God. The faith is from God. All of it's from God.
It's
all God.
Yeah, it is.
But a person is justified by faith alone, but that faith does not remain alone.
Does not remain alone. Yeah. That's a good word there. Well, we've had a great discussion today.
Yeah,
thanks so much again, Pastor Mike, for the opportunity.
It's been good.
To share a little bit.
Thank you, Cristy.
Yeah. For the Sound in Faith podcast, I'm Pastor Thomas.
And I'm Pastor Mike Johnson.
And I'm Christy Lawson.
And Lord willing, we'll see you Sunday.